or listen on the Sactown Sports app.
We are back, and just as promised, we are joined by friend of the show. He was a hot name yesterday. Everybody fighting to get him on their show, but Sean likes us the best, so he joins us. Sean Cunningham of Fox 40, sports reporter for Fox 40. Sean, thank you for joining us. Happy Friday, my friend.
Yeah, man. Happy Friday to you guys. You don't need to fight over me. I'm community property here in Sacramento.
Sorry about Dave's call this morning.
Yeah, sorry about Dave's call this morning during crosstalk. That
oh
was
yeah,
fun.
that was wild.
Yes,
that was wild.
Yeah, it was. Trust me, it can get like
that.
I'm sure you know. Sean,
did
Cunningham,
you guys? By the way, did you guys see how that phone call ended?
Yes.
So tremendous. He and I share a love of doing that to people, and I still do that to people to this day.
It's a great bit.
I didn't know what it was.
Really good bit
because the conversation ended, and I asked Dave, "Well, what were you going to tell him?" He said, "Oh, there's nothing. It's a bit. It's a bit." Yeah.
And I literally texted him. I said, "Do you realize? Did you hear me say, are you going to hang up on me now?"
No, I didn't.
Wow, great stuff. Well, you didn't hang up on Domantas Sabonis. You did a great job with that interview, Sean. Let's just start here as it kind of came out today, and Domas changing his number, which was how we started the show, obviously, with Father's Day coming up. I don't know if that timing was on purpose, but great timing by Domas. And, he obviously said he loves being out here, wanted to make Sacramento his home. What stuck out to you the most from that Domantas Sabonis interview?
The most I'd love to say like the just the overall topic, and it's funny, Alan, because it hadn't dawned on me. Maybe given my own background, I actually forgot that it was Father's Day weekend. Like I didn't, I'm not a father that I know of, and I don't have really huge ties to a father myself. So yeah, it just kind of dawned on me. I'm glad you pointed that out. I should have realized that, but I actually was, we've had conversations since Domas landed in Sacramento about, Arvydas Sabonis, his father, following in the footsteps of an absolute legend, Hall of Famer. And even though we didn't go super far detailed into it, it might have been among the most welcoming of the conversation that we've ever had in that regard, and talking about his dad. And, obviously his dad being someone who can be critical, who can look back at his own child's game and have pointers, but realizing that the game today is so different. And, Domas saying that there's no chance that he's as good as his dad ever was. And,
right.
We've had conversations similar to that, but I think the thing that stood out the most in the conversation that I had with him this week was just how much fun he had in actually talking about his dad, because oftentimes those answers are a little bit shorter, and it just doesn't seem like a topic that he welcomes so much. And it's probably because he's talked about it so much over his life.
Right.
But obviously with this weekend being, as you pointed out, Father's Day weekend, and the number changed to not only honor his father, but how much it means to his family. And then, of course, just the story about his daughter. I mean, born on July 11th last year, and ironically naming her 11 was just really cool and very humanizing, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a great interview. Definitely go check that out right now. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you, Sean, yesterday you also broke news of Sasha Vezenkov, and just what a weird situation it's been with him over the past week. You first get the reports from overseas that Sasha, I mean, the wording was a little confusing, but essentially, Sasha and the team aren't seeing eye to eye, or I guess are maybe seeing eye to eye, and they're going to try and find a new home for Sasha. And then you come out yesterday and essentially say that you've been told that the Kings want to keep him, but there's a market for him that the Kings could potentially explore. My question is more so, and I understand if you can't really give us all of the information, but really, what has your week been like in terms of getting that initial report and then you digging into eventually finding out that the report wasn't 100% accurate?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of peeling back the curtain a little bit, when a report like that kind of surfaces and you're rushing to try and find information on it, especially when you have something that seems so definitive, like
right,
Sasha wanting to leave his team, or even just the NBA for that matter. you're probably not having to reach too far to find people who want to talk about it. And I'll be honest, like there was some crickets for a couple days, and that was a little bit surprising. But I feel also like it kind of happened over the weekend, and I think there's a lot of parties that kind of wanted to make sure there was some clarity there. And yeah, I mean, started hearing from folks right around Tuesday, and then it kind of, I mean, there's a lot of people that I've heard from, and I almost didn't really report what I reported yesterday. But I think there was a lot of confusion out there, and once I got source that who called it off base yesterday, I had to go with it because I feel like there's look, I think what Sasha Vezenkov said in his exit interview following the Kings season, if you happen to hear those comments, I feel like Sasha told you everything you needed to know. He doesn't regret coming to the NBA. He doesn't regret coming to the Sacramento Kings, but he, like any player in this league, wants to play. And Mike Brown has talked about overall this season about being a learning season for Sasha, especially given the injuries that he's had. I mean, you're talking about 9 weeks of an ankle injury at 2 different points of the season, and only being able to appear in really 42 games. And when you're practically he's 28 years old and a former EuroLeague MVP, there's a culture shock. There's a shock to the system of learning a new NBA game. And I've heard a lot of people in my mentions, at least the ones that I can actually translate and read, that might, people wondering, like, does Mike Brown hate Sasha? Does he not want to play Sasha? It's like, well, when you're injured that much and you're still learning a new game, Mike Brown I talked to him at the Republic game last year, of him going overseas to see Sasha and really be excited about what he was going to bring to his team. Now, he talks about that year being a lot like what he experienced in San Antonio with Manu Ginobili, and how that first year was really like a learning year, a rookie year, or a redshirt year, if you will, to learn and to kind of get accustomed to things. And I think he anticipated getting Sasha Vezenkov more minutes last year, but I think the injury played a huge part of that. And I think just ultimately the way the team played and defense and some of the things they were trying to get better at certainly just created moments where you can't really get him out there from beyond 10 minutes. And if he's doesn't have it that night, or doesn't have something that's just hot that night, then it might not go completely the way that Sasha would like it to go. Now, all that being said, is I think we had clarity there that Sasha was not thrilled with his role. But I think when you're hearing things like he's willing to leave the NBA after one season, you need to get somebody to say definitively whether or not that's going to happen or not. Now, I think there's people who will read my tweet and say, oh, all's great, he's going back to the Kings. Now, that's not necessarily true. I mean, the NBA changes by the day. Yes, would the Kings like to keep him? Sure, he's a commodity. He is an asset on the team. Other teams may look at him the same way, but Sasha Vezenkov only wants to go and be where he can play, at least from what I'm told. So they're going to have some things to figure out over this summer, and it could be that Sasha Vezenkov isn't on Sacramento next season, but that possibility always existed as they stepped into the offseason. And furthermore, just as I was told this week, is that Sasha will honor his NBA contract.
Talking to Sean Cunningham of Fox 40 sports reporter, who had the report out yesterday that the report from the weekend of Sasha wanting out wasn't completely accurate. Also a great interview that you can find on Fox 40 with Domantas Sabonis. Sean, I want to ask you this question because Chris and I have been going back and forth about it as far as Sasha is concerned. And whenever you bring up Sasha, people talk about what you just mentioned. Well, Mike Brown flew out there, right? And it seems like you're kind of alluding to Mike Brown wanted to get him more time. And let's not forget, Trey Lyles did not start the season, so there were opportunities there. I've been in the camp of, I'm not really sure Sasha is a Mike Brown guy as far as wanting to up the defense. You have this ridiculous offense last season, then you add more offense. Do you think there was a disconnect anywhere between the powers that be with Sasha and the expectations for Sasha?
That's a good question, man, because I've wondered that myself at various times, especially with people who are so high on him, and not only just around the NBA but within the organization. And clearly, like any NBA team or pro sports team, your front office puts together the roster for your head coach to have control over. And yeah, I think ultimately they probably envisioned Sasha Vezenkov having at least the front office, and when they brought him here, having a role, but maybe right away, I think they understood that there was going to be an adjustment period. So I think they were, I think they were okay with the decision that Mike Brown had made, especially when you just factor in the injury. Especially early on, when you think about just the adjustment time and what that might take. And, guys, I was talking to people that thought, both inside the organization and outside the organization. And I said as much throughout the year, at least in the early portion, that, Stockton might be on the table for Sasha to really get his feet wet and to really try to get familiar with the NBA game. Ultimately, I think they, if you kind of look at the history of young players that they've had on their team, sometimes they don't throw their players to Stockton right away. Being around the NBA team sometimes is a bigger benefit than being in Stockton to learn the ins and outs of the NBA. And practices ultimately become their game days, so those tend to sometimes be more valuable. So I don't know if there's a disconnect to your point there, Alan, but I do feel like, at least early on, at least for this season, there's an understanding that it was going to take some time. And I think if you factor in situations like the injuries that he experienced, it certainly put him behind the eight ball in the eyes of the rotation, and Mike Brown's rotation in specifically. So it's just unfortunate. I think it's an unfortunate situation for him, but it's also pro sports, man. You don't wait on anyone, and no one's entitled to anything. So the fact of the matter is, he signed a 2-year deal with a team option for the third year, and we just completed year one.
Sean, I was wondering, you've been one of a few people to be able to break some of the pre-draft workouts that the Kings have had. And we were looking at the list of names that they've brought in. Not a lot of players that they've brought in have been in that top 15 range. It's been a lot of late first round guys, a lot of second round guys, and a lot of guys who aren't even featured on a lot of mock drafts. If you would have asked a lot of people about a month ago, I think a lot of people would have assumed the Kings aren't planning to make 13. And with what I just kind of laid out, are you getting any sense of what the Kings plan to do with number 13? The draft is only 2 weeks away at this point, or something like that. Like, are you getting any sort of feel for what the Kings plan to do at number 13?
No, not really. I mean, it's all over the board, man.
Yeah.
I think if you're a betting man, I think it makes sense for a lot of people to think that they're gonna probably move the pick, but I'm not so convinced of it. I mean, I think you have to be prepared for anything. I mean, certainly, you spend your time wisely at the combine, and certainly you're going to be prepared to make the pick. But I think you're going into it as, if you're the Kings, you're looking at options to make your team better and better for the now. And certainly there are players that are intriguing at 13 that, could help an NBA roster. And I think that they've projected people like that, but you could also move up, you could move down. I mean, there's so much optionality that you can have within the draft itself, and what that could land your team. At the end of the day, if the options aren't to your liking, you pick and be prepared to do so. So I think that the names are interesting that have come through. Certainly, I think they're, a lot of times people will hear some names and try to keep 13 and 45 in mind, the picks that they'll hold in the draft, but not realize that, hey, part of it also is you have a summer league team to field.
Right.
Not only do you have a summer league team to field during the California Classic, you kind of have 2 summer league teams to field. So that's a lot of dudes within your ranks. And then let's not forget, you also have a G League team. So a lot of these names could be familiar when they pop up in possibly the summer league, G League, and you take it from there. So you just have to be ready for anything. And I think this organization has done a really good job when it's come to the draft of leaving no stone unturned. And if you have a moment to talk to someone that may not project, or you see in rankings or mock drafts, which I always kind of throw away and just uses fuel and information to kind of get educated about a player or a team situation, use it for, food for thought in a way. But I think you do your due diligence and meet with them, because whether or not that person ends up on your team during the draft, doesn't mean that's the last time you see him, both as opposition, but even as a possible partner down the road.
Yeah. Talking to Sean Cunningham of Fox 40 sports reporter. Sean, we've been going back and forth and obviously playing with the trade generator. Everybody likes to do that this time of the year. And a name that continues to come up is Keegan Murray. And we've had multiple people on this show really try to figure out what Keegan Murray's ceiling is, right? Some people think he could be an all-star. Some people think he might not be an all-star, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be a really good player, right? Some of these guys in the league who have never been all-stars have been part of championship contenders and champions. What do you think Keegan Murray's ceiling is?
Whoa. That's a big unknown for me, man, because I can see what people project him to be. I've heard a lot about the Chris Middleton projections and where, what that is. And yeah, certainly you can see it, but I just see him as a really solid ball player. I don't know that, if I was a betting man, it's your gun to my head and I had to say, what he will ultimately be, I don't know that he's going to be an all-star player. I wouldn't probably bet on that, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I never thought De'Aaron Fox would be a scoring type of guard the way he is, upwards of right around 30 points a game, 28. I thought he'd be in his career a more, 23 to 24 point scorer per game, but I didn't see the league going to the type of scoring firepower that you see among teams today. Right. So projections wise, I mean, I don't know. I still think that I do feel that there's an area he can get better at, and that's completely, taking guys off a dribble, getting into the lane, shooting over the top, creating more of an open shot quicker on the offensive end. What he did defensively, I think this year was super impressive. And so, when you're trying to talk about ceilings and things, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I can understand why there's so many people that are high on him. I can see how many people consider him to be untouchable. I just deal more in the reality of things that no one's untouchable. Right. You can, if you want to get better at, you got to spend money to make money. And, you certainly saw that when Tyrese Halliburton was sent to Indiana and Domantas Sabonis comes to Sacramento. So if there's a move out there, you make it. I don't think I don't view him in my mind as untouchable, but I can understand why a franchise would want to build around him. And certainly I think what he did this past year would kind of fuel that desire to build around him, Domantas Sabonis, and De'Aaron Fox. But I think when you look at that, I don't think anyone's looking at that right now as a three-headed monster. And I still think you're looking for another pillar, if you will, where, you have to find your second or third best player, and Keegan Murray kind of takes a backseat to that.
Sean, I have another loaded question for you. It's something we talked about a bit. Yes, I know. I'm sorry. But I know you're prepared for it. It's something we talked about a bit yesterday on yesterday's show. And I think it ties in with the draft. It definitely ties in with who the Kings might look to bring in via trade this offseason. What do you think of the Harrison Barnes spot? Do you think the conversation we had yesterday is, do you think the Kings can make the leap or make the next step that they hope to make with Harrison Barnes still in the starting lineup? I don't think he has to be straight up removed from the team, but I think a lot of people see the Kevin Huerter and the Harrison Barnes spot as the clear and obvious places to improve this roster. Do you think the Kings can make the necessary step without upgrading that Harrison Barnes starting spot?
Yeah, I mean, my own personal opinion, I've always felt, least of last year, that when you bring back Harrison Barnes and he's a guy that kind of gets he's a lightning rod in a way, because so many people look at him as an unproductive player, and to certain places, I can understand that. But to me, I feel like there's too similar of a role between Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes for what they play. And if you're going to get better, I feel like you have to upgrade one of the positions. You really have to upgrade that. Now, whether it's in the starting lineup or it's just across the roster, I would sense that you'd have to make a decision there in order to ultimately get where you're trying to go as an organization. So whether that's this year or next year, I don't know, but certainly Harrison Barnes has a very team-friendly contract for both Sacramento Kings and others, so I can understand him being a commodity for others, especially if Keegan Murray is quote-unquote off the market. But you have to pair it with something. I think you have to make it attractive to other teams. And I think a lot of people, when they're out there, they look at they try to find the one man's trash is another man's treasure. But I think you have to really understand that Harrison Barnes is a value to a lot of teams and what he brings, and he's capable of winning you games. And you have to respect the ability that his ability to stretch the floor. And if you look in today's NBA, having shooters all over the place, you can understand why his services would be valuable. So it's just a long-winded way of saying, yeah, in my opinion, you've got to in my opinion, if you're in a starting rotation or just a roster in general, they're too similar to me, Harrison and Keegan. And obviously Keegan has the upside there, and Harrison could be moved, but every time I feel like Harrison's going to be moved, he hasn't.
Yep.
Sean Cunningham, Fox 40 sports reporter. Sean, thank you so much. Real quick before we let you out of here, we know we put you through a gauntlet. Mike Brown going to be in JaVale's Jug Life charity softball game. Any other big names that you might know maybe showing up for the softball game?
Oh, put on the spot. I know Terrell Owens is there. I know he's going to be there. I have heard a couple others, but I'm just I'm blanking at the moment. T.O. was the one that stood out for me as as a Niner fan growing up and everything. So I'd pick him to swing for the fences, huh? I mean, seriously, athletic at everything he does.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for Mike Brown to do a full swing bunt or something. I mean, I think that can be a lot of fun. But I wish I could make it out there too. I've got some family dynamic tomorrow, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I wish I could go out there and see that, because I've seen it in years past, especially with so many when JaVale was on the Warriors and had so many Warriors ties, and I think that's probably where really the Jug Life softball game reached its crescendo. But it's certainly for a good cause, and he brings out a lot of solid people out there, so I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Sean Cunningham, thank you as always, Sean. Enjoy your weekend. Be sure to check out all of Sean's pieces and articles, and also that new interview with Domantas Sabonis. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Coming up next, we break down everything Sean had to say, and we get into some mock drafts for the NBA when it comes to your Sacramento Kings. Stiles and Watkins, Sactown Sports.